and welcome back to Ars Arcanum, an exploration of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe? It's not a multiverse.
Yeah, it's just a universe.
It's just a universe.
Okay.
They're just planets.
They're just planets.
Yeah, they're not like alternate universe. I'm Nora.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm Nora.
Yeah.
I'm joined by Autumn.
Hi, I'm Autumn.
And we're also joined, as always, by Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. That's not the name I was using last time I was on the podcast, but now it is.
Now it is.
Gosh, it's been that long.
Yep.
It has been a minute or two since we last were here to regale you with the stories of Raoden, Sereni, and Hrathen.
And Fortin of Hrovel.
Fortin? A subject of Hrovel?
Yeah.
But first, as always, has anyone read any other books in the last 6 months?
I'll go first because I have a very, very brief segment, which is the book I read most recently is Rhythm of War, which we will be talking about on this podcast in like 37 years or something. So, like, don't even worry about me. I've read some other books between then and now, but like the one I read most recently, we will cover someday, so I just won't talk about it.
I read the entirety of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini.
You did do that. I forgot you did that.
And also his space opera book that he wrote came out in 2020. Late 2020.
How'd that all treat you?
Pretty poorly, all things considered. The Aragon stuff, way better than To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, I think. Despite To Sleep in a Sea of Stars being maybe a better put together book, it's just Mass Effect is the thing, to the point that after each big action set piece, the main character will go down the list of the crew members on the ship and talk to them and get, like, the next step in all of their backstories and, like, character arcs and stuff.
No way.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
No fucking way.
Uh-huh. The big... I guess I'm gonna spoil To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, kind of.
No one's gonna read that book.
I don't know. It's 880 pages. No one's gonna read that book. The big, like, transcendent moment of clarity that the main character has, and the way that she uses that insight to solve the problem of the book, is just creating the Citadel from Mass Effect so that the two alien species can live together and, like, work out and, like, really just sit down at a table and talk about the issues. And that's, like, the supreme wisdom that she gains in this book.
But, like, they could do that anywhere. The thing that prevents people from talking to each other is not having a venue.
No, now they have a venue where there is a consciousness built into it, because it's a grown, like, substance. And there's a consciousness that runs it, along with all the... Stop me if you've heard this before. There are these little drone-type creatures that crawl around within the thing, maintaining it. Just like in Mass Effect. But also, it's, like, guarded by her, or a part of her, that will stop you from bringing weapons on board, and stop you from being violent, because the thing standing between these two peoples coming together in peace is the fact that individually they commit acts of violence to each other.
That's not how anything works.
They even say multiple times the jellies, the like blob type aliens who can basically upload their brains into other bodies and, like, go through different forms. They're always saying, yeah, we were going to invade y'all anyway, 'cause you're scary. But now we have to deal with the corrupted, which is, like, the third faction in the war. Basically, they got all their shit from finding Prothean artifacts, vanished artifacts, and built off of that, whereas humanity just managed FTL spaceflight on their own and didn't really find the alien artifacts until well after that. So they're like, oh, that's weird. We don't like that. We're going to wipe them out for sure. And that's just not resolved because that's a bigger thing than just the one alien guy that likes the main character being the guy who speaks for the species.
The reason that the Allies and the Axis powers didn't get along was not because no one built a convention center where they couldn't, talk about stuff. Having a place to talk doesn't change anything.
It's not really... I don't know. It's not really that so much. It's like, what if your fascist empire was expanding and then you found another fascist empire that was also doing that?
Okay.
But you didn't have the context that Europe has. Like, you're meeting for the first time.
Okay.
What if there was another Europe, basically?
What if there was a second Europe?
What if there was a second mirror Europe on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and they were also trying to colonize your Europe, Europe Prime?
Okay.
Also, they didn't have any concept of continuity of self in the way of they're like, yeah, I might die and then my brain will get uploaded into another body and it'll be fine. As long as my pattern survives, I survive. And then all the humans are like, but won't you die? And they're like, well, this body will die. And they're like, well, then do you get all the memories of this body when you get your new body? No, it'll be a different... it'll just be like a 3D printed person. And the humans are all like, that doesn't make it... That's a different guy.
This book has too many elements.
Yeah, it's 880 pages long.
There's too many things happening in this book. I need Christopher to pick, 2.
A third of it is a quest to pick up the magic staff that solves all the problems. And then they find it and it's broken.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Nora, why did you read all these Christopher Paolini books?
Every week I have 1 or 2 8.5-hour shifts that I can listen to things during, so I listened to all of those books. The Inheritance Cycle I listened to because it's been a minute. Some of those books I've only read the one time, and I wanted to revisit it and see what the deal was, because I remember there being a lot of weird shit in the later ones. And there is some weird shit in the later ones, because by the time he gets to the 3rd and 4th books, he really wants to be writing to sleep in a sea of stars, so it gets all these weird sci-fi elements in the ways characters talk about and use magic that are just weird. And also, his ideology is just bleeding off the page. It shifts because, he goes from being 19 to 27 or whatever over the course of these 4 books, and he's so very clearly the child of 2 business owners. Aragon has a moment where he goes around to pay his debts, to say thank you to the people who have helped him or who he has kind of screwed over in the past. And one of them is he goes up to this friend's wife who used to be a wealthy noblewoman, daughter of a shipping company guy, and she married this other guy who's also doing shipping stuff, and his business gets destroyed because the Empire's agents figure out that he's helping the Resistance, so they just start sinking his ships mysteriously. And she's really upset because she's accustomed to a certain way of living, which involves having money. And his thing is, thank you for letting Jode bro out with me and fight the Empire. Here's a ball of gold that I summoned from the earth and coalesced. It's a sphere of pure gold. I know that with your business cunning, you can turn it into a much bigger amount of gold. And she does. And she rebuilds Jode's shipping empire from that one small investment, that one loan. she turns it into a huge thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's just a side character.
These books sound fucking terrible.
They're really fun. They're gay sometimes in ways that I don't think Christopher Paolini ever intended. Mm-hmm. In the first book, there's a part where Aragon meets Murtagh, and this is like in the chain of events where he's captured and then gets rescued by Brom and Murtagh is also there helping. But Brom is like injured, and so it's the three of them for a little while as Brom dies, and then it's the two of them, and they have to like keep going on this journey. And they start like Aragon has been sparring with Brom as he's being taught how to do swordplay over the months of travel. And so they start sparring because Aragon's like, well, I need to practice, so you don't have anything to do. So they just start fighting, and then the first time they fight, they push each other, like, so hard. They're, like, matching every strike, and they're just sweating together and, like, clashing against each other. And, like, immediately it's clear that they are completely evenly matched, and they're so satisfied by this contest that they've created between each other, and like nobody ever wins. They're constantly coming to a draw every night, but they keep doing it, and they have this really like immediate rapport that's just the most homosexual activity.
What's better than this?
Just guys being dudes. It's just you and your bro, like, arm wrestling so much that you become best friends overnight. Like, you become really intimately close with each other because you're sharing in this mutual exertion that, like, pushes your bodies to the limit. And Paolini doesn't see any of that, and apparently some people on the internet do see what I see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not too surprising.
They don't see the other one I see, which is the rebel leader who hates magic and fears magicians, and then the, like, head mage of the rebellion. Both of them are young women, and the mage thinks that the rebel leader is dumb and doesn't know what she's doing. And there's, like, this mutual hatred that is just so sexual. Mm-hmm. That nobody else, nobody on AO3 at least, has really tuned into that one. But there's a very, like, potent mutual disgust that would make for some very spicy fanfiction.
Oh, Kismesis. Did I say that right?
Kismesis.
There we go. Thank you, Mark.
Right now?
We're talking about Homestuck and the thing where trolls in Homestuck also have, like, hate romance. And then, like, two other kinds.
Why is everyone talking about Homestuck last week?
It was 4/13.
Because it was Homestuck Day. That's Homestuck's birthday. It's one of the high holy days of Homestuck.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Homestuck, the guy from Homestuck.
Yeah.
That's his birthday.
He
plays the game on his computer.
It is John Egbert's birthday, yes.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're trying to joke around and be, like, obtuse about it, but it is his birthday.
That is one of the, like, I have read a little bit of Homestuck.
Mm-hmm.
By which I mean the first part.
Act 1?
The first act?
Yeah.
You have read very little Homestuck.
I've read 1/6 of Homestuck, I think you'll find. And
now that is not true, but, like,
I like Act 1. I know a lot of people don't like Act 1. I thought Act 1 was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, people sometimes present it as though, like, none of the character work in Homestuck happened until the trolls got there, and I think that's not at all true.
Yeah.
I don't remember most of it. I just remember the clicky mouse and orb? Collect orb.
Yeah, you do collect orb.
Yeah,
I forgot about
spend orb to create.
Yeah.
That's what I know about Homestuck.
It's sort of... Yeah.
Grist.
I mean, all of that is true. My grocery list is called Grist. Because, like, my my Google Keep note, because the first time I was making a grocery list in Google Keep, I mistyped grocery and it auto-completed as grist, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go with that.
I also read a whole bunch of other stuff. The Dying Earth by Jack Vance. Occasionally a few chapters of I only have the modified title in front of me. Shadow. What's the full title?
Oh, The Shadow of the
Shadow
Torturer.
of the Torturer. Because the book I have says Shadow and Cloak because it's the first two books in one.
It actually says Shadow and Claw. I think you'll
Claw?
find.
Yeah, okay. I had to
Nora
look...
is like leaning over the laptop trying to get a peek at this.
I think Cloak features in somewhere.
There is a cloak, but the first book is called The Shadow of the Torturer. The second one is called The Claw of the Conciliator.
Yes. A couple chapters of that. I read another book for another podcast. It's not the Back to War, but we're getting there.
We gotta get back to war.
I read a detective book.
Yeah.
Umineko.
No, Red Harvest.
Don't talk too much about Red Harvest because I might pick it up. So.
I'm going to talk about it on the podcast, the other podcast.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot.
I'm doing the thing where since I have Audible and I get a credit every month, I'm pairing my audiobook choices with the games I'm playing for Journal Updated, which is at thesecondbestgame.club. So, to pair with Disco Elysium, I read Red Harvest.
Yeah.
But anyway,
cool.
I don't know that I have that much to say about any of the other stuff I read. The one brief note about Dying Earth, which is the sci-fi / fantasy amalgam book that Gary Gygax really liked. And when he decided to put wizards in his game, he was like, I'm going to make it like the Vance books. That's why it's called Vancian Magic now. When you read the source material that Dungeons & Dragons is based off, and I don't mean just Lord of the Rings, you really get a sense of like, damn, this game really had no chance of ever not being racist. Because it's not just like the Tolkien like fantasy race stuff. There's like so many more influences on D&D that like all of it is so baked in that it never had a shot. And Wizards of the Coast has no interest in really addressing any of that, and in fact has developed new ways for D&D to be racist as like an institution since then. So that was just a weird moment of realization.
Yeah. Mark, what have you been reading?
So I've read, I mean, it's been a long time, so I've also read a lot of books. One book that I read is Elephantasm by Tanith Lee, which is, basically a book about a girl who's living in desperate poverty in Victorian London, who ends up, having to work as a maid for this family of like truly awful aristocrats, who a big part of how and why they are truly awful is that the patriarch of the family made his fortune in India and is incredibly racist and obsessed with India. So he's like brought a bunch of Indian stuff home to England and has like has built this like weird like Indian English fusion castle with like all of this like ivory from, in many cases, from like elephants that he killed.
Mm-hmm.
And this weird supernatural revenge thing happens. And there's there's some extremely intense Victorian BDSM, and nearly everyone dies horribly by the end of the book. And it's called Elephantasm, which I feel is just like a really strong statement that Tanith Lee cannot be contained or stopped. I'm not sure I would say that it's like a really good book, because it's definitely pretty Orientalist in its treatment of like all of this Indian sort of cultural imagery that it's using. But it was a really compelling thing to read. And like Tanithly's style is really, really cool, I think. It's very, I don't know, it's just very beautiful language. So yeah, that was fun. And I've recently started rereading 3 Parts Dead by Max Gladstone, which is part of a series that I bet people who enjoy Sanderson or find Sanderson interesting would also enjoy Gladstone, because the basic premise of his setting is that souls and like sort of human faith are used in this setting as a form of currency, and basically like contract law is magic. And the central premise of the story is about this city that runs on these 2 gods who are survivors of the God Wars, which took place like about a generation ago, where a bunch of mortal sorcerers fought the gods and successfully killed several of them. And there's this sort of thriller plot with a number of viewpoint characters who are trying to solve this mystery of like what has happened to one of the gods on whom this city like depends to function. Not just in a like, oh, this is the god that everyone worships, but literally like divine power is what runs most of the technology that the city uses. So it's a huge problem that one of the gods is sort of mysteriously missing, maybe dead. Yeah, it's cool. I've read, I think I've read 5 books in this series before, years ago, and I'm having fun rereading this one. It's the first in the series, but the 3rd chronologically, and you know that it's the 3rd chronologically because it has the word 3 in the title. He was very helpful about that.
Coheed and Cambria.
No, Coheed and Cambria is all fucked up, because in Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3 is the 2nd album.
But it might be the 3rd one chronologically, because there is a prequel.
I guess so.
There is a prequel. At least one.
I guess they retroactively made that okay.
You think that's not all up in his head? That sounds neat.
Yeah, I recommend it.
I love to strap God into a battery.
It's kind of like that.
Talking about Elephantasm did remind me of one other book I read in the break that I'll just briefly talk about because I think it's really good and it's pretty different from like the stuff that we're covering. And so maybe if you hate fantasy novels but you listen to this because you just think we're all very charming and fun, you should read Mexican Gothic. It's a pretty like, if you have read kind of the classics of the like Gothic genre, like, you know, your Wuthering Heights, your
Hexen, your Heretic, your Gothic, like the video game Gothic.
Oh, totally escaped me.
Just picking out things that sound Gothic-y in video games.
You know, your Brontes, your Draculas. Like, it's pretty familiar ground. This book came out in 2020, and it just kind of transplants a lot of that stuff out of the more common what am I trying to like English or American South settings into Mexico in, I believe, the 1930s, like post-revolution. And it does a lot of like tropey stuff, but it does that all really well. The other book that is a huge touching stone for that, I think, is The Haunting of Hill House. So if you like The Haunting of Hill House, like, I am lukewarm on The Haunting of Hill House and was really taken with Mexican Gothic, but I can draw a direct line between one of the, like, Hill House to the other. So, yeah, if you like all that shit, like, you should read Mexican Gothic. I don't want to say too much else because, like, it's a book that very quickly starts to reveal itself to you in a fun way, so I don't want to, like, spoil too much, but yeah.
Nice.
I think there's another book we all read.
We did all read 3 chapters of a book.
That's right. Today we're going to be talking to you about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We read Elantris. It's back. Chapters 19, 20, and 21.
Remind me, I do the raid and summaries. Mark does the Serini, and you do Hrathen. Do I have that right?
That's correct. We don't have
That's
the
what
summary
we've been
pages
doing.
open like we usually do, but
I have mine on my phone, so I can start whenever.
You go ahead.
All right. If Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace, I'm going to read the summary for Chapter 19, and try not to editorialize too much until I get to the end. Raiden dreams of being brought to Elantris when he was a child and to have healing done on his badly infected broken leg, and of his wounds and pain vanishing. Sorry, I'm going to take another run of this sentence. It's phrased in a really weird way.
Yeah, this is an awkward sentence.
This is a thing we've run into the last couple times we recorded this podcast.
Raiden dreams of being brought to Elantris when he was a child to have healing done on his badly infected broken leg, and of his wounds and pain vanishing, but wakes up to increasing agony from 3 weeks of accumulated bruises and cuts. Raiden feels his pain in waves rather than a steady, constant pain. Sheor's band launches a surprise attack, but they are rebuffed, though Seolin takes a stab wound, which he claims is a badge of honor. Raiden visits the Hall of the Fallen, a rudimentary hospice where his group has been gathering as many
Say it.
Many Hoid is Hoid. Right, that's the word.
Hoid?
No.
As many Hoid as they
I'm
can
gonna
find.
start the sentence over now. Raiden visits the Hall of the Fallen, a rudimentary hospice where his group has been gathering as many Hoid as they could find to care for them as best they could. Taian loses interest in politics and spends his time studying all the examples of art in the chapel. Raiden studies a tome that contains advanced case studies in Aeon Door that mostly describes unintended effects. Galadon explains to Raiden that Door is an unseen force and a central concept in the Jesker religion. Raiden infers that Door is still partially working, allowing Elantrians to live without consuming food by providing energy to them, and that if they fix Aeon Door, it will fix Elantris and the Elantrians. He also deduces a link between the Aerolines, the land of Arelon, and Door due to geographic restrictions on the function of Aeon Door.
Does the audiobook really say Hoid?
Hoid. Also, I took very specific, because every fucking episode of this podcast we make fun of me of not knowing how to say the name of the city. It's Kai. I took a note of it in my head. It's Kai.
Okay.
Anyway, the summary does not get to what I thought was most interesting about this chapter, which is mostly in Raiden has his dream, which we can talk about in a second, but I don't think that there's a ton there to talk about. And he wakes up and he experiences his pains. There's more to talk about there. But the thing that I really latched onto this chapter was Raiden gets out of bed and then just starts wandering around Elantris being like, it's so hard to be a king. I'm not a king, I'm just a leader. But everyone calls me king and says thank you, king, when I do things. And it's really hard to be so good at this, but I have to be strong for these lowly peasants that I have taken in my charge. It's really funny. It's the most he's Brandoned yet. This is gonna be, like, what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be, to have other people follow you is, like, the central concern of a lot of Brandon's fiction writing. And it just feels like he's really beating you over the fucking head with it in this chapter in a very funny way to me.
There's definitely an emphasis on that thing where, like, giving other people, like, jobs to do that he's convinced them are important is relieving everyone else's pain, but it doesn't work on Raoden. And I think it's so funny how that's presented as, like, this mark of his nobility. Like, I really think we're meant to feel sympathy for him because of that. But, like, what it means is that everyone believes his bullshit, and it doesn't convince him because he knows it's bullshit. Like...
But the way that Brandon wants to frame it is not he's selling them a crock of shit. The way that Brandon wants you to think of this is like all the people around Raoden are fine with cleaning the shit off the walls or being his honor guard or what have you. But Raoden is called to a higher purpose than just this, and like must always strive to like do better, you know?
Not only that, he works harder than everyone.
He explicitly says he works harder than everybody and has more purpose than everybody else.
He was more purposeful than any of the others, and he was the most determined to see Elantris succeed. He had filled his days, leaving no empty moments to contemplate his suffering. Nothing worked. The pain continued to build.
It's hard to separate what here is Brandon and what here is Raoden, because to me that sounds like Raoden.
Brandon.
To me that sounds like Raoden being a self-aggrandizing asshole. But I think we're just supposed to take it like at its word that he is more purposeful and more driven than everybody else.
It's a little weird to me because, like, okay, the theory behind giving everyone else these little jobs to do, at least some of which, you know, to give him credit, the people he has planting food, that's actually useful.
The hospice, actually useful.
I just keep coming back to how nobody thought about farming until Raoden showed up.
Yeah.
They call that out in this chapter of, like, they hadn't considered farming.
But Mark, finish what you say.
What I was just saying is that, like, if it's true that having something to do that gives people a sense of purpose, whether or not it's, like, really important or not, is helping them not feel their pain as much. And I feel like the way it's being presented is not just like, oh, everyone's kind of ignoring their pain because they have something else to focus on, but literally, at least the way Raoden sees it, seems to be that this is, like, effective pain relief. Why is it not working on him? Because it's not like he doesn't have anything to do. Like, he's very focused on doing a bunch of stuff that he believes is extremely important. So, like, why does this sort of psychological trick not function on him?
It's weird because there's also, like, one or two things that I couldn't quite parse. There were one or two things where I couldn't quite parse, is this Raoden's perception, or is, like, whatever magic is happening here affecting him differently? Because he talks about, like, oh, everybody else feels the pain, like, constantly, but for me it comes in waves, and, like, there was one other thing, I can't quite recall what it was right now, that was, like, this detail about how Raoden experiences this stuff differently that I couldn't parse, like, oh, is this actually, like, has the Reod, like, hit him differently in some way? But I don't think that's what they're doing. It might end up being that, but I think this is just supposed to reflect his state of mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think it's notable that the Coppermind thinks that we need to know that Raoden feels his pain in waves rather than a steady, constant pain. Like, you know, perhaps this is a bit of a, you know, perhaps this is sort of, I don't know, like, I don't actually want to use... I wasn't going to use that word because that's a ridiculous way of describing what I'm doing, but yes.
Like, I was having this with another podcast where I was looking at the descriptions of Marble Hornets episodes, where they call attention to certain details that you might not even notice the first time watching them. And because, like, with hindsight, the wiki can just plant those seeds and, like, draw reference lines between different aspects, you know, but that's not the experience of watching it.
Yeah. There's also, to kind of move along a little bit, like, so Raiden gets a couple different scenes in this chapter, but I think, like, the bulk of the chapter, maybe, like, the most beyond just me being amused by Brandon's, like, theming that he does throughout all of his books, like, the other big interesting thing here is Raiden goes to his study to read this book about Aondor, and you start to get, I think, the first conversation, really, of him and Galadon are trying to hash out, how is the magic working? Like, there is clearly some puzzle that we don't have all the pieces to, and, like, let's start working that out. And there was stuff that I was latching onto as a person who's read too much Cosmere stuff, and so I maybe don't want to lead this part because I don't want to say something that I get ahead of myself, but, like, I had a point that I was getting to, there was a thing, I almost expected the summary to be, like, really going in depth on that part of the chapter, and it feels like the summary is just like, yeah, he makes all these connections. Like, they connect Aondor to the door. I was not... So, let's go over this both for listeners and for myself. What is Aondor? Aondor...
So, it's like the I guess it's not quite a language, but it's a writing system of these symbols called aeons.
Right.
And, like, the language that Raoden and Serene and, like, presumably basically everyone in this story so far speaks, which I guess is the language called Aeonic, I think?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's the language that, like, Aralene's and Serene's people, the Teoish, speak. Like, it's the words in Aeonic are composed of multiple aeons, so, like, Raoden's name contains the aeon Reo, if I'm understanding all this correctly.
Which means spirit.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, Aeonic is the language,
and
Aondor is the set of characters of Aeons, but is also the word of the magic used through those symbols.
Because the door is sort of like
a jar.
Well, first of all, I have to... I think I said this before we hit record. This is extremely funny when you're listening to it in the audiobook and you keep hearing people talk about the door and you don't realize that it's D-O-R.
Yeah.
So, the door is sort of like... the Force. It surrounds everything. It penetrates and binds us, whatever.
I do feel like we should make it clear, though, that's not part of, like, the lore about Aeons or the Aeonic language or Aeondor.
Yes.
Despite door being in the name of this thing, nobody has noticed until this exchange between Raoden and Galadon that door is not a word or not a part of... Door does not make, like, etymological sense in Aeonic.
I think that Aeondor is itself a creation of Elantrian culture.
Okay. Elantrians also spoke, and I guess still speak, Aeonic, right?
I feel like the Elantrians who had magic lore training created the phrase Aeondor as this sort of linguistic link.
Mm-hmm. Because the one of the important things that they hit on is that door is more closely associated with like the Duladel culture and Jesker and the Jeskari mysteries.
No, the Jeskari mysteries are different from the religion of Jesker.
Yes.
We don't know what these things are yet, but we know they're different from each other.
Yes. But, like, door is a concept that is in that culture that is not in the, like, Shudireth and Shukorath cultures, really. Like, these two other major, like, world religions don't really have a concept of door, which is Galadon describes it as like, you know, if the river flows because like ice melts on mountains and things move downward, like everything moves downwards, but the door is this sort of force out in the world that makes the water want to flow downward.
It seems like a very, you might call, spiritual thing.
Yes. Like,
you might capitalize that in a few books.
I feel like it's worth maybe reading what Galadon actually says about it, because the stuff he says is kind of vague and, like, interpretable in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Door is the unseen power. It is in everything, but cannot be touched. It affects nothing, yet it controls everything. And then he also says, Jesker teaches that only humans have the ability, or the curse, of being oblivious to the door. Did you know that if you take a bird away from its parents and raise it in your house, it will still learn to fly? Raoden shrugged. How did it learn, Sewell? Who taught it to fly? The door? Raoden asked hesitantly. That is correct. So it's the force that makes water want to flow downwards, and it's also the force of, like, animal instinct that means that birds learn to fly on their own. But it affects nothing, but it controls everything.
Yeah. And, like... Yeah, so... I don't know what to make of it. I feel like the characters got a little more out of it than I did, almost, because, like... There's clearly some sort of, like, mystery that we're supposed to be starting to put together about, like, what happened to the Elantrians that we just clearly, like, don't even have enough, like, we're clearly not seeing even part of the picture yet, I mean, like.
This feels like what Way of Kings would be like if you really tried to bring it under 400 pages, right? Like, this feels like rushing through, but also not having the space to do everything.
Yeah.
And, like, we're, like, 263 pages into this book. My book stops at around, like, 570, 580. Like, we're approaching the halfway point, and we're just being introduced to the points of interest that the characters are trying to deduce.
Yeah.
Like, I guess Raoden has been doing that this whole time, but, like, he's mostly been more materially focused on, like, I want to make this place nicer. And now he's just started to really get into, I want to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
I also am really struck by how little Raoden knows about the door, which is clearly, from the way Galadon talks about it, the door is clearly, like, complicated and mystical and, like, central to Galadon's religion. I would not be surprised if, like, the way that Galadon thinks about it, you need to take a lifetime to understand the door. And then Raoden hears, like, the most sort of basic description of it, and he's immediately like, oh, it's the door that's keeping Elantrians alive.
Yeah,
it's the same thing as the force I sensed when I was healed one time. He's taking, like, his one ever experience of Aeon Door and being like, oh, I immediately understand. It's the same thing as the door.
This is like a guy learning about Tao for the first time or something. Like, oh, feng shui. I understand it.
Yeah.
And reaching for these things that are foreign to his culture and, like, immediately implanting them onto his own experiences.
Yeah.
And, well, he's right. Like, he will turn out to be right.
That's the other thing, is that, like, the chapter would work a lot better for me if he was like, oh, I wonder if these two things are connected, and we're gonna come back next time, and he's, like, doing more research, and he's like, oh, I think maybe they are connected because of other detail that we were exposed to. But because of the just wonky pacing of this book, it's just, like, we can't have any sort of, like... It feels like everything is a slow burn and nothing is, you know? Because he has to just immediately put it together. And you just know that he's correct.
It's a slow burn, but it's 200 pages. Yeah. So it's like... It's a slow-paced story.
Yeah.
But it's like... I guess it's like... It is just a weird pacing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
Can we talk about the sort of further conclusion that he comes from comes to with this idea about Door, where it's like, oh, it's also linked to the land and our bloodlines.
Right.
Okay, so not only the link between ourselves and the Door, not only that, but there must be some sort of link between this land and the Door. And Galadon frowns and says, why do you say that? Because Aeon Door was developed in Arlan and nowhere else. The text says that the farther one travels from Elantris, the weaker the Aeon Door powers become. And besides, only people from Arlan are taken by the Sheod. It can take Teos, but only if they're living in Arlan at the time. And it takes the occasional doula as well. Oh, I hadn't noticed. There's some link between this land, the Arlenes, and the Door. I've never heard of a Fjordell getting taken in by the Sheod, no matter how long he lives in the Arlon. Doulas are a mixed people, half Jindo, half Aeonic. Where was your farm in Douladel? So Aeonic is not just the language, it's also like an ethnicity, I guess?
Yes.
That's, I mean, for what it's worth, that's like not, I don't feel like that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
Like, language groups in the real world are often ethnic groups.
Galadon says in the north, and the part that borders Arlan, Raoden says triumphantly. It has something to do with the land and with our Aeonic bloodlines. And then Raoden gets a little own in on Galadon, because he's like, if you're such a simple farmer, how do you know the word empirical?
Shut the fuck up, Raoden! Shut the fuck up!
I'm really frustrated with Galadon in this chapter, because he's kind of like, he is sort of like making fun of Raoden as Raoden makes these like huge leaps of logic, but he's not in any way actually like opposing him or like pointing out the clear sort of gaps in this idea, or like in any way he's not in any way opposing the idea that like you know, that Raoden kind of immediately understands this core concept from his religion and can immediately link it to, like, Raoden is basically saying, oh, the Door, this Jesker idea, it actually has more to do with my people than it does with yours. And Galadon is just kind of like, I guess that makes sense. What do I know about these things? And it's weird. Like, I think we're meant to think that Galadon is kind of, you know, that Galadon's perspective is prompting Raoden to think in new ways, and, like, by, I guess, introducing the concept of the Door, that's happening. But it's just not a very sparkling conversation. Raoden is just kind of talking at Galadon, and Galadon is like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Do we have anything to say really about his dream sequence? I didn't really get anything out of it other than just like, here's what Elantris used to be like, which we kind of already knew.
I think the only thing that I want to mention about it is how like how weird some of the descriptions of the Elantrians feel to me, because like they're meant to be sort of visual descriptions, and like these are the impressions that Raoden had as a child seeing these people, but they're the thing that really, really stood out to me was the description of like what their skin.
I was just
like.
looking at that paragraph right now, and I was about to read it out loud if you didn't bring it up.
Their bodies seem to shine with the same inner light as the city, their skin a luminous pale silver. Not metallic, just pure. And I'm like, okay, if it's not metallic, why did you say it was silver? And what do you mean by saying that their skin looks pure? Like, what am I supposed to picture here? Other than just like they're very white people, like, which is what's literally being described.
Brandon.
And then the hair is also described.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Nora?
Their hair was white, but not the worn-out dull gray or yellow of the aged. It was a blazing white of steel heated to an extreme temperature. A color free of impurities. A powerful, focused white. Bruh. Like...
And it's like, I you know, Raoden as a child is like amazed to see these people who, you know, are in the culture that he's grown up with, at least some people view them as like living gods. So I think it's understandable why he has this strong impression of like purity when he looks at them. Like I don't think it's unreasonable that that's what his emotional impression of them is, but like it's a little like the way it's presented is very much as though this is just what the Elantrians are. This is what they look like. This is what anyone would think looking at them. And then you have to wonder, like, okay, why is Raoden's father incredibly distrustful of them? Like, does he not see the shining purity? Or like maybe he looks at them and he's like, wow, these people are totally bleached white. They look like creepy corpses or something. You know,
but
I just can't tell exactly. It's a weird description.
It also doesn't say that it's Raoden at all, and only after the page break when he wakes up are you told that this was Raoden's perspective, or that it was like a memory of his, or even a dream. It just starts off like with the cold open of just describing Elantris.
I mean, I did guess that it was Raoden pretty quickly, because we know this thing about how his leg was healed by an Elantrian when he was a child, right? But yeah, it is a little bit like, you know, it is a little bit like, wait a minute, we're back in Elantris and the Elantrians are alive again? Like, what happened?
Autumn, are the... I guess you wouldn't know, but are the flashback chapters in Stormlight usually in italics? I feel like they're usually in italics.
I have no idea. I've only ever listened to them.
I just...
I have no idea. I don't even know how I would come across that information.
I'm just a firm believer of the dream sequences should be written in italics in your book.
I mean, I guess I can go get that copy of Way of Kings.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But yeah.
I guess I kind of disagree, just because, like, I mean, it's if Brandon wants to give us a sort of dreamy sense of unreality and, like, not being sure, is this really happening? Have we gone back in time for, like, a few pages before revealing what's actually going on? I feel like he has the right to build a little suspense that way.
Yeah, no, I thought it was kind of fun to, like, especially because we had, like, such a big break. I was like, what's going on? Did I, like, miss something? Oh, okay. Weird.
It's wild that we stopped the podcast the week before things started happening in the book.
Should we on that note move on to chapter 20?
Yeah, sure.
Because I feel like nothing happened in chapter 19, but
well, that one guy got owned.
That guy did get owned.
There was a fight scene we kind of skimmed over because it wasn't that interesting, but that one guy got beheaded and they buried him because they're like, well, he doesn't move, we're pretty sure he's dead.
If he's not dead, that's horrifying. I think I must have missed the part where they buried him too. I definitely heard the part where they were like, we're pretty sure he's dead.
beheading. We're given the lore, like, beheading probably kills us. They don't move their eyes anymore.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's true because I think all of Brandon's, like, life-preserving magic systems all rely on you not getting decapitated. I feel like...
You've gone beyond me now.
Okay.
No, you read Alloy of Law. You know how that situation is resolved.
I guess so. We're definitely getting way ahead of ourselves.
I'm just talking about Brandon here.
I know.
The one thing... Sorry, go on.
Brandon subscribes to the, like, 2011, like, zombie theory of whether or not your magic can preserve you through an injury. Like, if the brain is gone, you're dead.
Okay.
In every Brandon thing.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Sure. The one thing that I thought was, like, of some interest that comes out of that fight scene is, like, because there's the guy who's beheaded, but then there's also a few people who are wounded in a way that would kill anyone but an Elantrian, and Raoden has them carted off to the Hall of the Fallen, and that introduces the idea of the Hall of the Fallen, where they're basically storing all of the Hoed and, like, trying to make things better for them, but they don't really, like, all that they're doing, I guess, is, like, kind of walking around and speaking softly to them, and it does seem to be quieting them down.
Yeah.
But it's a very, like, I don't know, it's a very, like, depressing setup, because it is really clear that there's just nothing they can do about this.
Step
suffering.
1, unite
And-
Elantris. Step 2, invent therapy.
Well,
God.
when Raoden is waking up out of his dream sequence and he still feels all this pain, we get a little bit of that, like, Raoden's sanity meter was going down sort of narration. Like, sanity is a number,
Yes.
and once it hits, like, 7, I'm...
Well, yeah, that's how Brandon writes.
I know.
Like, we'll return to this talking point many times over the next several books, but...
I know, but, like, it's really bad here, where sanity is a number, and Raoden is really worried about, like, his sanity falling below a certain threshold, and, like, it's so weird going into the Hall of the Fallen, where it's like, well, you know, they need 20 sanity points to, like, be people who we consider alive, and right now their sanity is at 15, but it was at, like, 5, so, like, we're gonna put that in the W column.
This whole book feels like a Telltale game. I was gonna say BioWare, but there's not actually enough, like, action stuff happening, because it feels like... We mentioned this last time with Raoden choosing the good dialogue options to convince Tayan to become Tayan instead of the false Baron. But, like, it really feels like, oh, because you made this choice last episode, now we have the Hall and Fallen. I keep reading Hall of the Fallen, and I just want to say Hall and the Fallen. Hall and Fallen. Now we have this, and that's gonna flag for a later episode.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like that. It feels like specifically the Telltale Game of Thrones, where you, like, hop between characters.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I would assume that on some level, Brandon is heavily influenced by A Song of Ice and Fire, right?
He's gotta be.
Like,
even if it's like, I want my epic fantasy series to be different, he's gotta be, like, living in conversation with these things.
Oh yeah, he's finishing Rhythm of War and saying, "Ha, that's 4.
Yes.
One more and we're even. Watch me."
Should we move on to Serenia?
Yeah.
So I can read the summary. Serenia informs Ahan, Royal, Eondel, Shuden, and Edan, who, if you've forgotten, that's her posse
The
of
boys
old
are
men.
here.
Yes. that they need to keep Eodon financially afloat so that he isn't replaced by someone who is more amenable to a Derethi invasion. Which, again, if you don't remember, there's this absurd system where the person with the most money gets to be king.
It's so funny.
I guess that's pretty true to life. In a way.
Well, but no. But the way that it's presented is not like if someone gets more money than Eodon, that person will do some political maneuvering that they can do because of all that money. It's literally like kingship will automatically transfer to them, like legally, because that's the legal system Eodon set up, which he never thought could possibly cause him any problems, and which he couldn't, like, change as he sees it threatening his kingship.
Because it would
Anyway,
be hypocritical.
I mean, he never thought anyone would surpass it because he cheats. He gets to include the kingdom's taxes as part of his income.
Yeah, but, I mean, according to Serena, he's still in danger, and, like, she's probably
but
right.
That's because, now, I cannot believe that someone would undermine economy, the sacred economy like this, and just start doing favoritisms.
Okay. They discuss various options, including an export arrangement with Teod. Sereni asks the nobles about how their figurative planting is progressing, and they all reply that are complying reluctantly. I assume that means they all reply that their peasants are complying reluctantly. I forget, she proposed some sort of crop planting scheme.
Yeah, this totally escaped me. I could not remember what this was at all.
She has some kind of... It has something to do with, like, food shortages, and she has, like, a clever idea for how they're gonna, like, plant more food. I've forgotten how it was supposed to work. I don't think it necessarily was, like... It was very much like Serene's clever plan, and I don't remember actually feeling that it was all that clever or, like, a good understanding of how, like, a food economy works. So I don't really feel like going back and looking.
I know that she's teaching the embroidery group to fence.
She's got her fingers in so many pies.
I have to hope that teaching the embroidery group to fence is irrelevant to the new crop scheme. But I wouldn't put it past Serene to somehow be integrating those plans.
Well, she's going to teach all the women how to fence, and then they're going to install them in various places so that they have a person who can kill various nobles.
Okay. Serene also reveals her plan for her widow's trial is to bring food to the Elantrians and requests the nobles all go with her to help sway public opinion about the Elantrians. But only Shuden agrees to accompany her. The royal offers support conditional on her getting Eodon's permission. Okay. Serene goes to Eodon's study, which irritates him, and reveals her simple-minded act was a deception, which enrages him, and he threatens alternatingly to execute or exile her. Serene counters that she knows about his shipping losses and the threat to his hold on the throne, but offers a lucrative trade agreement between Teod and Arelon in exchange for permission to enter Elantris to perform her widow's trial, which Eodon accepts. This is kind of why I'm saying I wouldn't put it past her to, like, have all of her plans somehow connect up, because that's exactly what she's doing in this chapter, is, like, she has maybe, like, 3 or 4 schemes, and she's, like, weaving them all together. Weaving them all together, huh? See what I did there? Serene returns to her rooms, which have not been cleaned, and sends for Mayala, a maid, to find out what happens. Mayala explains that the maid who was assigned to Serene's room ran away, and was the 4th maid that year to depart abruptly.
We're putting so many pins in this.
Yeah, look, there's so much to say about that. Serene wakes up very late due to noise from the walls, and makes a note that this is the 4th time she has observed this, twice on Mayadal and twice on Opadal, which are days of the week, I guess. And all instances taking place at 11 o'clock at night. I do love that the names of the days of the week are totally different, but the timekeeping system is the same. She speculates that there must be a hidden passage inside the walls leading to the king's chambers, and that Eodon is using the passage for some unknown purpose.
Big chapter.
Okay. Yeah. So Serene is honestly doing a lot of stuff at this point. I don't think we can claim that Serene doesn't have a plot.
That's fair.
Owned.
Nora being like, I told you.
Owned. Yeah, also she, like, drops the bimbo act.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about. I guess want to start with, like, it's really funny that in one sentence she's like, I wasn't an idiot the whole time, and Iadon is like, oh my god, you weren't an idiot the whole time.
It was me, Austin!
It's literally, they exchange one sentence, and he just, like...
I mean, there's a pause between those two sentences, but
like, it's just really funny. It feels like such a quick turnaround of she says one intelligent thing, and he figures out, oh, she's been playing me for a fool this whole time. Oh.
And it, like, he, Ragdomi, he swore, using a curse so vile Serene had only heard it twice. Like, we've seen before that Iadon has an extremely short temper, especially when it comes to Serene, probably because he hates women. But, like, he's just, like, he is all, like, foolish pride and nothing else.
Yeah, like, she says one smart thing, and he basically is like, you cunt. Like,
yeah.
It's weird.
But it has God in it, so...
And he threatens...
he's like, God's cunt, girl!
And he threatens to kill her over this. Like...
Also, I don't know. He threatens to kill her because she's played him for a fool, but nobody else in the court knows about this. Like, nobody else knows. So, like, if he did execute or exile her, it would just be like, oh, we had a conversation in private one time, and then I immediately had her killed.
Yeah, it's... Like, I know we're supposed to think that he's really bad at this whole kingship thing, and that's why he's, like, in danger of losing it at this point. But, like, he has such a short fuse, and he threatens to do really foolish things on a hair trigger because of it. Like, I don't understand how he's kept power for, like,
I mean, what they've
years.
said in multiple scenes is that because Raoden was keeping everybody happy, they endure all of the king's, like, chicanery because they know that they have a cool prince.
Yes, and I want to talk about that more. But the thing that boggles my mind is that he apparently had enough tact to get onto the throne, and because of Raoden was able to stay on the throne, but he had the tact to get there, and then as soon as he got on the throne, became prideful and stupid and couldn't, like, out-scheme anybody and was always being, like, played like this. So, like...
Can we also talk about, like, how good at, like, making plans and manipulating people is Iadon actually? Because, okay, in his interactions with Serene, he seems extremely short-sighted and, like, very bad at keeping track of, you know, what his interests actually are, as opposed to, like, what he's emotionally upset about in the moment. But then we're also supposed to believe that he's, like, this incredibly canny merchant.
Yeah.
And, like, later in this scene, he basically totally snows Serene's father and, like, you know, manipulates him into this business deal that's really, really favorable to Iadon. And, like, it's as though, like, socialize and, like, business are two different stats. And he has, like, a 10 in business, but a 0 in socialize.
Well, it's... he has a 2 in socialize, but he has, like, a 7 in intimidate, maybe.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that in the first scene where she's talking with all her dads or whatever,
her collection of uncles,
yeah, her uncle posse, they're like
Uncle Squad. Uncle Squad rolling out to Elantris to hand out food.
When she talks to Uncle...
Only 2 of them are actually doing it, though.
When she talks to Uncle Squad, she's like, well, I want to do this. And the Uncle Squad is all like, oh no, he has a 10 in business, so you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z to trick him into this. Like, he's apparently really good at business, but also apparently there's only one way to be good at business, so if you get a squad of uncles who are also good at business, they can collectively outfox him and give her a script to go into this meeting with to outfox him with. It's dumb.
I feel like Iadon's prominence in the plot is going to dwindle over the next half of the book.
Yeah, probably.
I feel like we're about to be done with this guy because I feel like some other plot developments are going to start mattering more than Iadon.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I assume, because the book is about Elantris, that this whole giving food to the Elantrians thing is actually going to end up being a lot more significant than this whole who's on the throne.
Yeah, it would be really cool if, like, the two of the three point of view characters were in the same scene as a result of giving food to the Elantrians.
They have been.
They have been. But, like, what if they spoke to each other?
Yeah, I don't think, like, winking at each other, or not even seeing each other from, like, one person up on top of a wall and the other person looking up from the city and not even knowing who each other are counts as being
it's
in
like
the same
new
scene.
type thing. You look out into space and you're like, I feel something.
Should we talk about how...
But they...
That man on the wall, is it Lala?
But they don't even... Yes, but this is a setting where if they had some kind of psychic flash, Brandon would make it super clear and would probably have a capitalized word to tell us about it. So we know nothing like that happened.
Should we talk about how, like... I feel like... I think it's after her conversation with Iadon. I can't remember because the summary doesn't really talk about this at all, but she has, like, a conversation with Ash where she's, like, haunted by the figurative ghost of Raoden here. Like, oh, he was such a good prince, and everybody loved him, and he kept the kingdom together because, like, everybody hated Iadon, but they knew that someday Raoden would take the throne, and he was down among the people, and I guess we've talked about this in previous chapters too, but, like, Raoden is getting elevated to this, like, godlike status that also it feels like maybe he was at before he died, that everybody just thought Raoden was the coolest guy who got the most pussy.
And now he's in Elantris, and he's teaching all of them about how cool he is and how he gets the most pussy.
I want to talk about the conversation she has with Ash, not only because of the how Raoden comes up in it, but also how it connects with this whole, like, maid
oh my
thing.
God.
Because I think it's actually kind of important. So, like, Serene gets back to her room, and the summary made it sound like Serene noticed that her room was messy. That's not what happens. Ash is the one who notices that the room is messy and is, like, not happy about it, which I mentioned in a previous episode. I was like, I'm on Ash watch. I want to see any sign of, like, agency or, like, will or, like, caring about something from Ash. And this is something. Ash doesn't like it when the room is messy because it means that the maids don't respect Serene. He basically says that to her, like, you know, if your room hasn't been cleaned, it means that the maids, like, your maid didn't do her job, and, like, that suggests that the servants don't respect you. Or maybe might stop respecting you if you let them get away with this kind of thing. And Serene is not really inclined to care about this, but Ash basically convinces her that it matters politically for her what the servants think about her, and that it's not... there's kind of this weird thing where, like... Basically, Serene thinks that Ash is accusing her of not liking the servants or not being nice to them, and Ash is like, "No, I'm telling you that they're, like, a political, that they're of political relevance to you." It's, I feel that this is very weighted because Ash is a servant.
I didn't even think about that part of it.
Yeah, Ash is a servant whom Serene definitely considers herself to treat nicely, but whose, like, opinions and perspective on the world Serene is, like, totally disinterested in fairness to her, because everyone believes that the opinions and perspectives of Seons? Is that how they're... Seons. There we go. Sorry. Been a while.
There is an Aeon inside the Seon.
Yes. It is not unique to Serene to, like, not really see Seons as, like, people who would have specific perspectives. But I do think it's, like, really hilarious that she can get this little lecture from Ash about how, like, you need to pay attention to the perspectives of your servants because it's, like, relevant to your position. But she's not in any way going to extend that to Ash.
Well, and, like, the thing that I was really latching onto in this conversation was that, like, tying it both into Raiden being, like, trying to give everybody purpose, and also, like, oh, when the people saw their Elantrian gods, like, falter, they, like, had a revolt overnight, and, like, there's a, like, persistent theme about how the lower classes need to be, like, put to work in order to have dignity, and, like, they don't respect Serene, which is going to somehow lead to, like, her falling in social standing somehow. And the way to fix this is to, like, make sure that they know their place as your servant. And it's just like...
And let's talk about why her maid didn't clean her room. It's because
you go.
Well, it's because one of the maids under the maid that Serene, like, talks to about this ran away, which is something that apparently happens often. And, like, this is also something that I think... Shoot. There was... Okay, it's in the next chapter, so I won't skip to it. But, like, this issue of, like, peasants, or I don't know if, like, a servant can really be called a peasant exactly.
They're
but,
indentured
like,
servants, so they're not peasants, but they're, like, a lower class.
Yeah, people who are, in a certain sense, like, owned by the nobility, running away from their posts seems to be a persistent problem, or a persistent theme. And I'll be honest, it makes me very uncomfortable how this is, like, brought up, but is exclusively seen from the position of these, like, nobles, and is primarily relevant as, like, a political problem for them to manipulate, or, like, a mystery for them to solve. 'Cause this is, like, you know, technically the peasants in this country are not considered slaves, but they are, like, you know, they can't leave where they live, and
they're
they have to work.
between nobility as well. We saw that scene.
Yeah.
And we've talked about how, oh, they're, like, practically slaves, or, like, Iadon is getting near to making them slaves or something. I hadn't thought about that because my immediate assumption was that these 4 maids that have disappeared have all been taken by the Reunited, but, like, yeah, as soon as you say it, it's like, ooh, oof, yikes. Like...
Yeah, I just feel like this is, I mean, it just feels like the idea of maids running away from the palace is being treated as, like, an interesting mystery, an indication of some weird thing going on that Serene is going to have to look into. Like, Mayala, the maid who she's talking to, is like, Domi knows why it is. No servant in the country is treated better than those here. And it's like, I mean, have you met Iadon? I find it's very easy for me to believe that there are things that really suck about working in this palace, even if, like, you get paid more and, like, have a higher standard of living than, like, if you're working on one of the farms. Which, you know, maybe that's just what she has to say to Serene, is to be like, oh yeah, things are great being a maid here. I don't know why anyone would run away. I promise it won't happen again, princess. But I don't actually think that's what this book is doing, you know?
for the most part, I take people at their word in this book, unless Brandon is, like, specifically drawing attention to, like, that person was definitely fucking lying, though. You know? Like, I can't think of anybody who's been, like, duplicitous in this book, except when it's, like, explicitly highlighted, like, oh, there was more going on here. Sereni could, like, read in his face that, you know, he really meant to say blah, blah, blah. But, So, yeah, when she says, I can't imagine why somebody would want to run away, I just, like, take that, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that is how this book is
I think
written.
it's funny that she says, if she can't think of a reason someone would run away after she's thinking about all the reasons she's unhappy here. Like, she's never going to run away, but, like, she definitely feels, like, not completely satisfied with how her life has shaken out over the past 6 days or whatever.
Yeah, how long has she been in Elantris? Or, not, in Kai?
Like, a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Oh, sorry. When you said she, you're referring to Sereni?
Yeah, sorry.
I thought you were talking about. I thought you were talking about Mayala, and I was like, oh, I didn't hear anything about her being dissatisfied. But sorry, I was just confused.
Yeah. What else?
Well, we can get into this secret passage.
Oh yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Secret tunnel.
Yeah. I am also on Ash Watch here because Sereni is, like, noticing this weird pattern of, like, noises that happen at a certain time and on certain days. And Ash is just telling her to shut the fuck up the entire time. Like,
it's really funny that Ash needs
like,
a cup of coffee when he wakes up and is not fucking happy if somebody wakes him up before that.
Like, Sereni is like, you know, she's hearing the sound, and she's like, what do you think? I am thinking that whatever my lady had for supper, it isn't agreeing with her, Ash informed curtly. So, like, I mean, I know Ash is, like, kind of, gets in these little jabs at Sereni sometimes. That's just sort of how their relationship is. But, like, Ash just repeatedly refuses to accept that this is a pattern of weird sounds that Sereni is hearing. And it you know, like, it's happened 4 times. She's maybe jumping to wild conclusions about, like, oh, it's a secret passage and Eodon is using it. But, like, the way that Ash is just, like, insistent that Sereni is totally making this shit up, it stands out to me. It makes me wonder whether Ash actually knows something. And again, I could just be trying too hard, and Ash could just be being kind of snarky for no particular reason, just because he needs his sleep, which I think is also bizarre and funny. When he's like a glowing ball.
They had touched on before that, like, the Sions sleep, I think, but, like, it hadn't really occurred to me that they might be pissed off if you wake them up.
What it says is, I thought Sions were supposed to have excellent auditory senses. Not when we're sleeping, my lady, Ash said, implying that was exactly what he should have been doing at the moment. It might just be quirky snark, but I would be very interested to see Ash have some kind of hidden depth.
Yeah.
The only...
But also, we know this tunnel, right? We already...
Oh, right.
Yeah,
we do know about this tunnel.
Yeah.
This is the one that, what's-her-name, who was one of the Elantris gang leaders until she met Raiden and realized what a king he is. Yeah, she was using this passageway to, like, visit her daughter, I believe. But she's not doing that anymore, if I remember
think Raiden
correctly.
might be doing it
So,
to look at his dad, maybe? Question mark? I don't remember.
I don't... So, was he... Shit. Alright, I'm gonna scroll up on the Coppermind, because unlike the crop planting scheme, I do actually want to remember if this is, like, following up on something. Because I don't think that Raoden would be taking secret trips through a secret passageway and not telling us about it in his narration, right?
I feel like we would know about that.
Raoden tells Karada not to reveal the route they take out of Elantris.
It doesn't sound like there's anything in chapter 13, which is the big tunnel chapter.
Big tunnel chapter.
Yeah, I don't think that the book has said anything so far about Raoden or anyone like under Raoden that he's aware of using that passage regularly.
Yeah.
I do think it's more likely that it's an Elantrian using that secret passage, like maybe someone that Karada did tell. I think that's more likely than that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Iadon feels like a very convenient explanation. In such a way that, like, yeah, like, putting on my, like, writer's hat, like, yeah, that makes more sense that it's gonna end up like, oh, I thought it was Iadon, and I was, staked out in these tunnels for Iadon, but it was actually an Elantrian.
I mean, we know that Raoden didn't know about the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Iadon also doesn't know about it.
No, Iadon knows about it because it's like the secret escape tunnels in case some assassins come for him. That's why they go right into his room.
Did Iadon build this castle?
I don't know, but he certainly has had 10 years to put in secret tunnels through the mountain.
I just don't remember. I feel like they said Iadon didn't know about it, but I could be wrong.
Maybe I'll reread that part of the book just to, like, get some clarity on this, but,
it's ultimately not that important now.
Yeah, like, I guess we will know what's going on when we know what's going on. My only other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on in chapter 20, which was just funny, was, in the Uncle Squad scene, I forget what it was, but, like, Sereni did that thing that she does where she's trying to get them to agree to go to give Elantrians food for the widow's trial. And, like, one of them is like, no, I don't want to do that. And then she says something else, and he's like, well, of course I would do it under this circumstance. She, like, catches him in some sort of hypocrisy. I don't remember what it was, but she catches him in some sort of hypocrisy, and he's like, oh, well, I guess I have to do what you want now because you caught me being hypocritical and you, like, outmaneuvered me. And it's like, it's really funny that, like, Elantris seems to exist in this place where, like, oh, if somebody calls me hypocritical, I just have to do what they say because God forbid I ever, like, went back on my word. Like, we are all, like, so honor-bound that if we were ever caught being deceitful or whatever, like,
or like
I'm now bound to do whatever Sereni wants me to do.
I think I know what you're talking about. This is it's Edon, who, God, I can't tell most of these lords apart. Like, except for Shuden, because it's consistently very Orientalist about him. So I know who he is. Anyway, this is all pointless anyway, Edon said, his hand twitching at the thought of entering Elantris. The king will never let her in. And if he does? Sereni asked quickly. Then will you go, Edon? The Baron blinked in surprise, realizing he had been caught. She waited for him to respond, but he stubbornly refused to answer the question.
So if you just out-logic him, like, he has to do it now.
No one.
And like, it's really ridiculous because he's not saying his actual reason for not wanting to do this, which is that he, like, fears Elantris and thinks it's, like, dangerous and disgusting. And he's just saying, okay, the king will never let her in, as, like, that is his excuse for why he doesn't even want to keep talking about this because it makes him uncomfortable. And then she's like, oh, well, if that's your reason, what if I take that away? And then it's like, oh, damn, I guess I have to do it. Yeah, like, it doesn't make any sense. anyone in this situation
come
would
up with
just
a different reason.
come up with another excuse, or even just honestly say, like, no, that also doesn't matter to me. I don't want to go to Elantris. Are you, like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
I don't like sludge.
No one likes sludge.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go to Elantris either.
I do think it's very funny. How, like, scared of Elantris everyone is. And like, how, like, shocked and horrified all the lords are by the idea that she's gonna, like, do a little, like, show-offy charity. Which, you know, I guess everyone's super scared of Elantris has been, like, a theme repeated throughout this book. But it just, it feels a little, irrational, and it's a little funny to see, like, that Serene is, like, smart and not bound by this, like, prejudice, but everyone else around her is, like, so scared of Elantris that they can't even think about the idea that, like, okay, if a princess goes in there with, like, guards, she's probably gonna be fine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm excited to see her show up with, like, 20 dudes.
Well, she can only have 10 dudes plus guards.
10 guards.
Okay, well.
What I'm looking forward to seeing is what happens, because, I mean, you know, I will say, there is actually an element of foolhardiness to this, because we know that when food shows up in Elantris, it's an immediate fight.
We'll see if the guards with her are enough to, like, diffuse that, or, like, deter that for the duration of time that everyone gets some food, but...
I assume there will be some sort of, like, light action scene of, like, the guards, like, fucked up some of, like,
You think the guards are gonna hurt Elantrians before she can stop them or something?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That would make sense. That would probably be the thing, is that, like, a guard is gonna cut off a dude's hand or something.
Reunited is gonna eat a $5 footlong and immediately become God.
Does that take us to chapter 21?
It does.
Can I want to stand
so.
up and get, like, a glass of water real quick.
Okay.
I can hear
I don't know, can you?
Wow. Welcome back.
I'm back.
I love that.
Welcome back to the land of paradise that is being able to hear Mark.
And welcome back to the hell that is talking about Elantris.
This is the duality of man. So, chapter 21. Wraithen sat in his chair, wearing a red dress.
No.
I will read the summary instead.
Thank you.
It's funny that he wears a robe instead of his armor, though, in this one scene.
Why?
Because I can't picture him outside of his armor.
Okay.
Because look, the cover is just fucking Nicolas Cage in red armor.
I don't know that I've actually spent that much time looking at the cover on the actual book. I've seen it in, like, 500 by 500 JPEGs a lot, but I haven't actually...
stretched and squashed.
Yeah.
But he just looks like vampire Nicolas Cage in red armor.
He does.
We've mentioned this before.
Raiden is not even on the cover.
No, he's not on the cover of the fucking book.
That's funny.
Wraithen offers to promote Therid to head Arteth, but he declines the offer, and Wraithen suspects that Dilof has something to do with it. I love these sentences.
Dilof.
Wraithen feels unease around Dilof and thinks about the fact that he frequently goes to the walls of Elantris to avoid him. Wraithen decides to try to relocate Dilof to avoid his Odivs interfering with his plans, and asks Dilof to hand-deliver a letter to Wyrn. Which Dilof agrees to do. Dilof states that he will need to take all of his Odivs on this important mission, which would cause great complications for Wraithen's plans. Because apparently Dilof has gotten all of the other priests to become his Odiv under Wraithen.
Well, not just the priests. It's like
Yes.
it's like noblemen and stuff. People who are new to this religion and who don't actually understand what a big deal it is to become someone's Odiv.
And so Hrathen changes his mind and tells Diloff to use someone else as the messenger. Hrathen encounters some beggars in the streets, and Nora briefly thinks that this chapter is about to get very interesting, but it doesn't.
I know.
And asks why they are a rare sight, and they say they have to hide in the other outlying cities around Elantris due to the king's decree, because you can't be a beggar in Kai.
We knew that before this, right?
Maybe?
I don't think it had been established.
Okay. I don't know why. I thought we already knew that.
Hrathen encounters Omen while at the Elantris Wall, who is the big priest of Shukorath, the other rival church. Omen confronts Hrathen about the fact he doesn't practice what he preaches regarding his hatred of the Elantrians. It's a weird time to drop that.
You should be lynching Elantrians. Like, what?
No, that's just a weird phrasing on this from this summary. Omen lectures Hrathen about truth versus belief. Omen also praises Hrathen's logic and determination, but questions his faith and leaves Hrathen to his thoughts and doubts.
Good Hrathen chapter, I thought.
Mm-hmm. The Diloff revealing this plot was very fun.
Diloff has 30 Odivs. He's got 30 guys to do whatever he fucking says. It's so funny.
Yeah, I know, it rules. And I love how, caught off guard Hrathen is by it, because everyone he knows has ever had, 10 Odivs at max, and has treated it like a really, solemn commitment. Which means that he just didn't think about how there's no rule in the book that says that you can't just make every guy you meet your Odiv.
You can't just make the church your Odiv, so that if you leave, you pull everyone out of it and just leave Hrathen alone. Hrathen just giving a sermon to the janitor because he's the only guy left.
Well, and also, Diloff has been the zealot who can't control himself, who is, working himself into a frenzy. And so, Diloff just immediately being oh no, also I have schemes. Also, I made 30 guys my Odiv. Is, a really good reveal that, Hrathen has been really underestimating Diloff.
Because Diloff is playing with different rules.
Yes.
Because he doesn't have that cultural context that Hrathen does. So he doesn't give a shit.
Well, and because Diloff is, a true believer, and so, he's gonna be ambitious, he's gonna do whatever it takes to, spread Shudirith, whereas, Hrathen kind of, doesn't even want to spread Shudirith. He wants Shudirith to, eat up as few people as possible, in its wake, you know?
He wants to spread Shudirith because the alternative is death and war.
Right.
Not because he's, actually a missionary.
Yes. And so, yeah, it's just really funny because, exactly like you say, they're playing different games, they're playing by different rules, and it's really funny that Diloff rules lawyer stuff and is I have 30 guys as my Odiv. What do you want?
I also think it's, I like how, we talked about how this is a little bit of a turn for Diloff because he's been, at least especially as Hrathen sees him, he's been just this, uncontrolled, passionate guy who just, really hates the Elantrians and really wants to, it really loves being Shudirith, but, I like that Hrathen might see it this way as, a contradiction of his behavior, but I think that it's actually very consistent, where it's okay, he's finally getting the chance to actually do some Shudirith stuff, and he's, going all out with it, you know? This religion is all about, swearing people to you in this feudal hierarchy, and, Diloff finally has the chance to actually live that dream. And he's doing it in a way that, is clever and, advances his own power. But that's also just because, advancing your own power is what you're supposed to do in this fucking religion.
Because, the chapter starts with Hrathen wanting to make this other guy his Arteth, and this guy being like, no. I don't remember if this is addressed. I assume that guy is one of Dilof's Odivs, is the real reason for that. And Hrathen has this whole thing because he's like, I've never heard of anyone doing that. Like, the whole religion is about ambition. I've literally never heard of somebody turning down a promotion. And yeah, it's just like really funny that like Dilof is just doing the religion better and harder and more.
Harder, better, faster, and stronger.
I would be willing to believe that Hrathen is right when he suspects that Dilof has something to do with Therid not wanting to become head Arteth. The words. But I don't think it's as simple as Therid is already Dilof's Odiv, and therefore it doesn't... Because I don't actually think this thing where Dilof has a bunch of Odivs is a secret, because Dilof reveals it to Hrathen right away. I think he just, hasn't told Hrathen, and Hrathen hasn't asked. And, maybe Therid is not up on that, and he thinks it's a secret. But I get the sense that there's something a little bit more suspicious going on here, where, Therid actually, for some reason or another, distrusts Hrathen, or, is doing other stuff secretly that means that he can't take on this other
Dilof
position.
Is, has a group chat, and he's, trying to cancel Hrathen.
Oh my god. I mean, Dilof would honestly, if he wanted to build up his own religious following and then try to convince all of those people that Hrathen's faith is weak, he'd have a pretty powerful case to make. Maybe I would not be surprised if that's exactly what he's trying to do.
I firmly became Team Dilof in this chapter. I want to I'm rooting for that little guy. To be clear, I think he's evil, but he's fun.
We've been talking about the fucking rancid dog man the whole book, and in one chapter you just turn, oh, I love that little guy.
I love that little guy now. He's evil, but he's got 30 guys as his...
Can I talk about my brain poison?
Yeah.
The Shu-Korath priest is named Omin, spelled O-M-I-N.
Uh-huh.
You know what other fictional character is named Omin, spelled O-M-I-N? Omin Dran, CEO of Acquisitions Incorporated, the Penny Arcade Dungeons and Dragons podcast / live show.
Oh!
Jerry Holkins plays a human cleric named Omin Dran, and it's just the same name, and I couldn't get it out of my head. It's a cleric. It's a priest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
Omin is so, generic priest. He's so generic priest that he's doing the, fatherly spiritual leader thing to another priest of a totally different religion. It really frustrates me, actually, that Omin is able to say this thing about, oh yeah, you have a lot of, logic and knowledge, but your faith, what happened to your faith, Hrathen? And Hrathen is actually, shaken by it, and is oh my god, where is my faith? Because, faith in, the way that faith looks to Omin should not have anything to do with the way that Hrathen demonstrates faith, because they're from two quite different religions with very different ways of interacting with the world.
Fundamentally, all these religions are kind of the same, and they have a universal, human experience at the core of all of them, clearly.
Oh my god.
I assume, this is just telegraphing to me that, Hrathen is gonna have some sort of face turn. I don't know when that's coming.
I mean, he's on the cover standing heroically with Serene, so I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, he's already got, his central motivation is, it's been emphasized multiple times that he doesn't want Aralone to be destroyed by Wern's, conquering troops. So yeah, I agree with you that I think we're really being set up to eventually view him as a more sympathetic character. But I have to assume he's going to ditch the whole, demonize the Elantrians thing before then.
I wonder what he's going to say when he sees Serene passing out Pop-Tarts in the Hell City.
I really hope next time we get a Serene Hrathen interaction.
Why does Hrathen always get owned whenever he talks to people? Serene owned him at the sermon, and Dilof owns him here.
I know.
An
in
Omen
every other
owns
episode,
him?
I have complained about the sort of gamesmanship between Hrathen and Serene, but actually, I think I kind of missed it. I kind of missed Hrathen tipping his hat to Serene and them trying to play each other. I don't know. It's the sort of thing that only hits you when you're reading this book 3 chapters at a time. But I think they have a good dynamic. I would love for them to be put all 3 of those people in the same scene next week. Hopefully.
Yeah, this story just in general badly needs to get its viewpoint characters in the same room. Because most of the other characters in the story are very flat and uninteresting.
And purposefully so. Because I think if you wanted I think there's a different version of this book where there are a lot fewer characters that are more fleshed out. We kind of there's one uncle, there's Galadon,
yes.
There's Duke Tellery, who's actually in the plot at all, and there's Dilof. But there's that version of the book, but the version that we have, there's a lot of people who are just the guy who scrubs the shit on the walls, the guy who is Raoden's honor guard, various and sundry people who show up to the Shu-Korath church, or Shu-Dirith church.
I hate to say this. Because we've been complaining about this book, but this needs to be longer if we're gonna have this cast.
Kinda. There's a million people who only have, one character trait, and their character trait is, their profession and, their ability to, get one over on somebody, or something like that. A lot of stuff just isn't fleshed out, but also I feel like the book is moving at a snail's pace, so I don't know that,
It's moving at a snail's pace very, very quickly. Because we're, like I said, 2 episodes from now we'll be at the end of part 1 and halfway through the book.
Yeah.
There's 6 more chapters, 5 more chapters to read, actually. So, 2 episodes from now we'll be reading the first chapter of part 2. Which I assume part 1 will have some kind of revelation or cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Fucking better.
What else is there in this Hrathen chapter? The beggars.
Yeah, I was about to bring those up, because I am fascinated by the actual, the idea that panhandling is illegal in Kai is not super far-fetched. Panhandling is illegal in many cities in the United States. But in the real world, that doesn't mean that you don't see people doing it. Right? And the way that these 2 people talk about it makes it sound as though the king personally is going to find out that they were begging in Kai and get them in trouble for it somehow.
This is a very strictly enforced law. That is not just somebody's going to come up and politely have a conversation. Impolitely, let's be real. Have a conversation about you need to get off the street corner. It sounds like the punishment is serious and it's strictly enforced.
And as far as I can tell, perhaps we'll learn more about this later, but the way that it is phrased is about why this happens. The king forbids begging in his city, good sir, the man croaked. It is a poor sign of prosperity to have us on his streets. If he finds us, he sends us back to the farms. And so it sounds like Iadon made this law because he thinks it's, like, it makes him look bad if there are beggars in his streets. But then, like, I don't know, this is all just, like, one of the loose threads that when you start pulling at it reveals the very bizarre nature of Kai's class system, where, like, it seems as though, Iadon has basically turned an entire class of people who used to do other things into, like, peasant farmers who are tied to the land that they work. And it's clearly not, like, functioning very well in a number of senses. Like, they're just not actually growing as much food as they need to because people who are not farmers have been forced to farm, and, like, people are running away. And, it just, I know it's supposed to be a system in crisis, but it doesn't really make sense how it ever, like, functioned well enough to keep people fed when, like, the entire, like, basis of the food of Kai was Elantris, and that disappeared all of a sudden.
Right, and, like, I think it's supposed to be a reflection of, like, oh, well, you get to be king if you have the most money, and you get to be duke if you have, like, you know, the second most money. Like, I think it's supposed to be a reflection of the sort of class system that prioritizes having money, but it also doesn't make any sense because, like, what are these people supposed to do about not having money? You know?
Farm.
I'm also wondering, like, when they manage to beg some money, like, where do they spend it? Like, are there, like, food markets? Can they go to those as, like, runaway peasants? I don't know. It's just all very confusing, and it feels like it's mostly set up to just have some, like, sad people who, Hrathen can, like, very clearly these guys are representative of people in Kai, and I guess the surrounding area, whom Hrathen can, like, use as a base, right? 'Cause he, like, there's this little end of their exchange, where Hrathen tells them to thank Jadith for his, because he gives them a ton of money, and tells them to thank Jadith for it. Who is Jadith, good sir? Hrathen bowed his head. You'll know soon enough, old man. One way or another, you'll know.
Why are you being so ominous?
Who is this Jesus? You'll know soon enough, my friend. Like, that's not an effective strategy for proselytizing.
When he said that, I thought Hrathen was going to be like, well, if you come on Opidal, you know,
Sunday morning, 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Like,
Skype in.
Sion in.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How tangible are Sions, do you think?
Like, can I put my hand on one?
Yeah.
I bet that the Aeon at the center is, like, pretty tangible. Like, I bet it's kind of like, maybe like, okay, what I'm imagining is if you try to put your hand into a Sion, I'm imagining that there is, like, a repulsive force that becomes stronger as you get closer to the center. So I don't think you can actually touch the Aeon. This is total, like, bullshit that I'm making up off the top of my head.
But about when it's a head?
What do you mean?
Like, when it turns into a head.
Oh, so, like, if you and I were Skyping over a Sion and I just started putting my hand in your face?
No, I mean, like, can you make out through Sion chat?
I doubt it.
Damn.
I know, right? I guess the thing in my head is that I almost imagined a sort of, like, disc
at the center that the Aeon was written on, and then the rest was just light emanating from the disc somehow. But I have no reason to believe that.
Yeah. That is a good point, actually. Like, Aeons are two-dimensional, right? Because you can write them on a surface. So, like, if you're looking at a Seon from the side, do they just look like a kind of squiggly line of light? If you look at them from behind, is the Aeon back?
I assume...
maybe it's like a texture in 3D, like it always faces the camera, i.e. your eyes. Okay, so I googled, can you touch a Seon, and got nothing. I added, can you touch a Seon Elantris, and the first result on Google is compromise.net/wiki/Fortin.
Oh, a subject of verbal?
Yeah!
Oh my god! He knows. He's the keeper of the secret.
There's gonna be a chapter where Fortin is like just touches Ash, just like reaches his hand,
Dribbles it like a basketball,
and Ash could be like, "Stop that!"
Yeah, that was my only question. Is can you like, do you think Raiden and Sereni like made out with their Seons? That's all.
They were dating. I know this. I know we've talked about this before. They were dating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they absolutely were. I don't think that they made out through their Seons, partly because I would be surprised if you can actually, like, touch it in that way, but partly because I think that Sereni would feel weird about making out with
Yeah.
Ash.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to sext if your phone was like, that shit was wild. You like getting what? In your where?
And Ash would
So
do
I guess
that,
that's kind of like hanging up after phone sex and Siri going, "Wow."
Siri just being like, "Damn, you really are a knife pervert. All that shit you retweet, huh? Okay, all right."
God.
I think that's all I have to say about Chapter 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel about ready to be done with this.
We will be back next time with chapters, I think I got this right, 22, 23, and 24.
Yes.
Those are the next numbers.
But scroll down, because I'm pretty sure you said it. Part 1 ends on 25.
27.
27. Okay. So
Yeah, no. So yeah, it is a round number of episodes. That we're not gonna get to part 2 halfway through.
it felt a little sudden, but I was like, okay. So yeah.
I mean, how many chapters are there? What's the number again? 63?
63, yes.
63.
Anyway, yeah, I was mistaken about something, that's all. But yeah. Mark, where can people find you online?
I have a Twitter account at Shar Asnablunt, and I have another podcast. It's a podcast about Moby Dick, which is a much better book than this one. And that podcast is called Higgledy Piggledy Whale Statements. That podcast also hasn't recorded in a while because I was busy learning other arts with the other monks at the monastery. But we should be putting out new episodes again soon, so stay tuned. Yeah.
Where can people find you online, Autumn?
You can find me on Twitter at autumnal_coffee. If you want, you can listen to And Then an Aeroplane, which is on the Abnormal Mapping Podcast Network. We're very close to being done. We have now covered every single Ghibli film. We have watched every Ghibli film. Next time, we will be doing a episode where we watch Kingdom of Dreams of Madness, the documentary about the making of The Wind Rises and Tale of Princess Kaguya. And we will be doing at least one bonus segment, maybe a little more. I haven't talked to Em about it, but that will be the end of And Then an Aeroplane. So if you had any latent feelings about Spirited Away that you never emailed to us, email us that. Email us your best and worst Ghibli films. Em and I are going to be ranking the Ghibli films on the podcast. You can send us your whole list. We'll read out your best and worst, and we'll tell you if you have good taste or not. Any Ghibli thoughts? Like, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I was just looking at the back of Elantris and then looking at the Star Wars text scroll. I think it's the same font.
I was looking at the back of Elantris, and down here in the bottom left corner it says, a new Ars Arcanum, and I was like, what?
Yeah, it has a new Ars Arcanum.
There's a podcast in there?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Nora, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at neither Nora. You can find me on Journal Updated at thesecondbestgame.club. We're playing Disco Elysium this month, so send your emails about Disco Elysium to journaluppdated@gmail.com. You can find me on Rush Chat Radio EXE, which is on this podcast network. You can find me on We Are the Champions and the Gillen Hall of Fame, which are also on this podcast network. We have a new Patreon goal also.
Yeah.
And maybe some more bonus content coming that we talked about today.
Nora and I talked about 2 different movie podcasts that we want to do today that we're both really taken with.
Both of which would be big, long-running, whenever we feel like it types of projects.
Yeah. That would be... I feel fine saying it because we're not announcing we're definitely doing one or both of these.
These would be Patreon exclusive.
These would be like Patreon exclusive podcasts. One is called You and Me, where we talk about Ewan McGregor movies.
I'm really enamored with that one because it's really simple. The only real gimmick is that we only watch one per year because he's been in at least one movie every year since 1993. So some of those multiple movies, I would insist upon only picking one movie per year.
Mm-hmm. And we probably wouldn't pick Phantom Menace.
No. There's another one there that we're looking at.
But we would pick Attack of the Clones.
I don't know. I mean, the only one we know for sure is that we would pick Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other one was... we don't have a title for it.
We don't have a title, but it's a Godzilla movie podcast.
It's a Godzilla movie podcast. Something I wanted to... You know, they call all the monsters Titans in the Monsterverse, the new Monsterverse, so...
Time to go Titans?
No. Titanfall.
Shut the fuck up.
Oh, I'm so excited about that new Apex character. She's Viper's daughter.
Okay.
Godzilla movies, they're pretty cool. I don't know.
I weirdly feel more strongly about that one, but also in a way that, like, I almost don't want to do it because I'm too invested in it.
You would turn it into another aeroplane.
Yeah, I turned it into aeroplane.
It's aeroplane coded.
It's aeroplane coded. For sure.
It pretty directly maps onto, like, replacing aeroplane, honestly.
Yeah.
But, those are things we're interested in doing as Patreon-only podcasts. Right now, the other thing that I've started working toward is Back to the Ark, which is a Marble Hornets podcast. And as soon as we reach the Patreon goal for the Patreon, on the Patreon, we will put out the Marble Hornets podcast. And that'll be a twice a week podcast, a very rapid fire release on that one, because it's going to be lots of episodes very quickly. So, give us money on Patreon if you want to see some or all of these podcast ideas, in addition to your normally scheduled releases. Yeah. Do we have a sign off? I forget.
No idea.
No, we don't. We have consistently struggled with this.
We said something about truth last time, right? There was a line
of dumb.
Wow, okay. I'm pretty sure I came up with it, so thanks.
I remember lodging objections on the episode about it. The problem is you need something, like, catchy and at least right now related to Elantris. Maybe as we get into Mistborn, there's going to be some
There's a
sort of...
catchphrase in Mistborn I know of.
Right, and so maybe once we get to that, we could adopt that, but, like, I don't remember what it is, and, like, for right now, we need something that'll serve as, like, sort of Elantrian.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Think you can do better?
I kind of like Thanks, Brandon, actually. I kind of like it. And I like that we all get to say Thanks, Brandon in, like, various tones of voice. Like, if we get to Mistborn and I'm just having a great time, I'm just gonna be like, Thanks, Brandon! But right now, I'm like, Thanks, Brandon.